The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome to Sister Speak. You're here with me, Mariam. Also joined in the studio is...
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's me, Fadeen.
And we also have a guest with us today, Arfah Farooq from Muslamic Makers. Salams to you.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Lovely to have you here. So today's topic, we'll be talking about Muslamic Makers and how it was established, and we'll be talking about how Muslims are influencing change in the tech space. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce Arfah. So Arfah Farooq is a community manager for VCs which are interested in impact and investing. She's also the co-founder of Muslamic Makers, which is an organization that seeks to upskill, mentor and create networking opportunities for Muslims in the tech space. So for those who don't know, Muslamic Makers was established in 2016 and has had over 4,200 attendees, 45 events, and recently had its first ever Tech Fest in the Royal Institution, which I was a beneficiary of, and I'm looking forward to talk about that later on the show. Arfah has also been featured as the top 30 London Tech Week Changemakers and has been featured on the BBC's, Forbes and various major platforms. So a huge honour for us to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Jazakallah khair for having me.
We're looking forward to delve into the topic. So before we do delve into our show, Fareen, what is our show about?
So, Sister Speak is a platform for Muslim girls to voice their own opinions on current events and issues and form discussions on general topics such as religion, culture, politics, identity, and social media. Please note all opinions and views are our own, and we respect all other and opposing similar views and opinions.
Thank you for that. So just to reiterate, all opinions and views are our own, and we respect all other opposing views. If you want to join in the discussion, Fareen, how can they contact us?
So you can call us on 01582 481 822, or you can WhatsApp us on 07779 481 822. We are also live on Facebook at Inspire FM Luton. And if after the live you have any thoughts or you want to share, your thought of the week, you can DM us on Instagram at Sister Speak.
Amazing, and we look forward to hear your thoughts. So I'm going to start off the show with our first segment, which is called Thought of the Week. So the Thought of the Week is a segment where we share something insightful, something that we've been thinking about, perhaps a reflection or even a personal anecdote. And I'll start off with Fareen.
Yep, so I've been listening to a lot of Islamic lectures these past couple weeks, and there's this one lecture that I was listening to, and this 2 weeks I was waiting to come on radio to say it as my thought of the week. And he said that every single thing that it's wajib for us to do, like praying, fasting, taking the shahada, it's obligatory, but for us it's a necessity to get through what we want in our purpose in life. And I thought that was so beautiful, because it's so true, because when you pray, you fast, you do all the things that, a Muslim is supposed to do to get to what you want at the end, your purpose in life. So the whole lecture was on the purpose of life, what you want to do, and if that you start looking at the things, praying and all of that, as not a chore, but something that it's gonna heal you, like your soul, and it's gonna heal your spiritually, then you're not going to see it as a chore, and it's going to be something that's going to be so in your life that it's just going to be so peaceful. So that was my thought of the week.
That's incredible. And I've been actually quite, ironically, I've been looking at, I've been studying Aqidah and Islamic philosophy, and we were talking about the tenets of faith. And actually, you're right, in terms of intentionality, when you think about the tenets of faith and how that informs our decision, that really can transform your life. And it really does implicitly inform how you view things, and it frames your mindset. So thank you for that thought of the week. I'm going to move to Arfah, which I'm very excited to hear her thought of the week. Arfah, can you share us your thoughts?
Yeah, mine is probably not as deep as yours, but it's kind of just about consistency, actually. Like when you try something new and say you're not getting like the right feedback, or it's not taking off, it's very easy to kind of just like give up. And I guess this thought simply comes from like, it's going to sound a bit kind of, I'm like trying to grow like my TikTok account, for example, right? It's like very simple, and it's really interesting because it's like, I've filmed tons of content and stuff like that, but then if I only get 300 views, I'm just not feeling motivated to like push out more or put out more. And it's just the fact of like nothing comes easy, right? And it's only through kind of consistency. And and I know that, and when we get into Muslamic Makers, we can totally like talk about that consistent effort is kind of what led to where it was today. But I think in the very early days when you're trying something new, it's very easy to just give up and not carry on.
Oh, no, that's a very it's good insight, because for a lot of people that's where the first struggle is, to just start something new and to be able to kind of pursue it and just be disciplined enough. I think a lot of the times your motivation might not be as sustainable as discipline. But on the note of social media, Fareen, do you have any thoughts on that? Because she's someone that's very interested in social media, and how do you navigate those kind of elements when you are making, for example, for Sisters Speak, social media?
It's hard. I'm always involved in a lot of social media, and I do like to make TikToks and everything for Sister Speak. So obviously you don't get the views that you want. You get a bit disheartened that, oh, this is not interesting to other people. But the thing for me is, in those 300 views, there's someone that's interested by it, and that's just enough for me. It doesn't matter if it's 1 or 2 people. At least we're doing something. People are looking at what we're doing, and I think it's so important. If it's 300 views, it doesn't matter if it's like a minority. At least you're giving a message, sending a message to those persons, instead of doing it to like 1,000 people and just getting nothing across.
Oh, it's really.
I think just to reflect.
Go ahead, Arfah.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think just to reflect on that, I think that's so true. You forget, right? 300 people is still 300 people. It's like a wedding hall, right? Probably on the lowest scale. That's like still 300 people. And you're right. From that 300 people, there might be one person that goes away and takes away something. There might be that one person that gets inspired, right? And I used to always have this saying I used to say, I might not change the world, but someone I might inspire might go on to. And actually, like, that's a good reminder for me. So thanks for sharing that, because actually, yeah, like, you're right. You forget that all it takes is that one person.
That's incredible, because I feel like as a beneficiary of Muslamic Makers, you definitely have inspired me, and the space that Muslamic Makers has had, the impact of it has really transformed me in terms of how I associate with people. And then I'm more in the civic space, so being in the tech space has been really different, and I will be sharing my reflections on that later on. So I definitely think you emulate that, embody that anyways. And I'm really looking forward for our viewers to be able to hear about your story in the later part of the show. In terms of my thought of the week, I think my thought of the week is about introspection. It's something that I'm very keen on talking about, just because in the last few weeks I've had some turbulence in my life, and I really did look into myself and look inwards in terms of reflecting how have I responded to these turbulences, and how can I improve myself. And I think one of the biggest thing is, when you think about self-awareness, you often do take that time to isolate and screen yourself. However, I think equally it's important to get objective feedback. And I know, Arfah, you just mentioned the idea of feedback. And I think it's really important to talk to people that you trust and people of knowledge to be able to kind of help you overcome certain challenges, but also to be able to objectively give you that feedback, constructive feedback, for you to improve and to grow. But I also think another element of it is to change your associates. And what I mean is that if you're immune to one certain group of people who have the same perspectives, it might not be as conducive to your self-development and growth as it would be if you pivot and you change kind of areas. So for me, I was quite big in the advocacy space, and now I'm sort of pivoting to the tech space. And the people I'm meeting and the kind of conversations I'm having really are revealing a lot of things about myself, but also it's been an opportunity for me to learn so many new things. So I think, kind of rounding it off, I think it's really important to be able to exercise introspection and to be able to screen yourself, but also to be able to take objective feedback and to be able to be open to different perspectives from that you're not usually inclined to.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Does anyone have any thoughts?
No, I think I do agree with you, Mariam. I think it's so important to be open-minded. And I was just reading Twitter, which you got me addicted to, and and they were saying,
"Oh, it's X now, apparently."
Oh, it's X now. Yeah, sorry, sounds a bit weird. I'm just gonna say Twitter so everyone understands. And they were saying, if what other areas have you done, like have you worked in that they don't related to your degree? And I was like, you can do so many things. Even though if I have for example, a degree in law, it doesn't mean that I only have to stick to that one thing. I can do so many other things. And I think it's really important to be open to doing anything that you are interested in.
Absolutely. Arfah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's just you shapeshift, and I think, like, I mean, we can go into a completely different discussion about like degrees versus apprenticeships and all that stuff. But I think ultimately it's like the world is changing so fast. So the jobs of tomorrow don't exist today. And ultimately you have to keep changing things around. So I think, you know, what you might study today might not, you know, there might not be jobs of that in the future, right? It could be taken away by AI and robots and all sorts of stuff. And ultimately, I think it's more about developing that resilience and developing kind of skills in terms of being able to pick up things and learn quickly that will take.
Absolutely. I think that's something that we've discussed before on our show as well, to be quite agile when it comes to getting new opportunities and trying to make yourself resilient to the job market, especially because, as you mentioned, the job market itself shapeshifts. So I think one of the things that people tend to misconstrue is that you have to do the career trajectory that you studied in, and that's definitely not true, especially if we talk about my career trajectory. I studied sciences, and then I studied English literature, and then I work in finance. So it's a bit of a change, but I think one of my kind of reflections is that it's really about what you put yourself into. So if you put yourself into opportunities where you're learning different skills, it kind of brings that balance up of your ability to be adaptable in different scenarios, and it makes you actually stand out because you're able to kind of pivot from different areas. And I think the education system doesn't really give you that scope or space to be able to think more broadly. But that's a whole kind of discussion in and of itself. And that's why I feel like tech space is really interesting, because whilst I might not have the experience specifically in terms of coding or specific tech kind of skills, which you probably can discuss later on, I do know that I have project management skills, which is something that's really important, and that could be transferred to product management. So I think it's about just really thinking about how you can assert yourself in different spaces and using transferable skills to be able to apply them in those spaces. But I'm sure we'll begin to delve into that a little bit deeper. But now I'm going to move on to a segment where we tend to do these would you rather questions with our guests, just to kind of warm things up a little bit and get our thinking hats on. So Arfah, I'm going to start with you. The first question is, would you rather live in a world where everyone can read minds, or a world where everyone can see the future?
Oh, that's a hard one. I think see the future. I think reading minds could get a bit toxic.
Yeah. I think see the future. Yeah, I mean, I prefer reading minds, to be honest. I think I'm so nosy. I just want to know what everyone's thinking about me all the time.
That's really interesting. I want you guys to elaborate on your answers. Did it start with you, Arfah?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, yeah, I'm totally nosy too, but I just think like reading minds isn't going to benefit me. Whereas I feel like seeing my future would. So if I see that, I don't know, I have a very unhealthy lifestyle or something in the future, it might force me to implement me to like actually like make changes so that I can change the future.
That's interesting. Do you feel though that if you keep thinking about the future, you're going to be living in the future and won't be conscious of the present? Do you think that problem would occur?
But I think you'd be able to make changes to implement in your present than to impact the future. That makes sense. Yeah,
that does make sense. You have to be resilient. I think a lot of times people tend to live in the future anyways. It's always about what if. So being present and conscious is something that it's a quality that you have to kind of establish. And I think as you mature and grow, for me, definitely, it's allowing myself to be intentional. For me, definitely, I would agree. I would not want to read minds. I think I barely can cope with my own mind, let alone thinking about what other people are thinking. Seeing the future would be just a bit more conducive in terms of allowing me to think, okay, this is what's going to happen to me, and I can affect change in my life in the present.
I got peer pressure now. I'm going to change my answer, and I want to see the future as well.
It'll help you in different ways.
Yeah, it helped me develop personally. You guys' answers make more sense than mine.
No, there's no right and wrong in these questions. It's just a personal perspective, and it's also the position you are in your life. I definitely think that as well. Just for context, Arfah, Fareen is actually in sixth form. She's a sixth form student who actually came from Spain, so English is like her fourth language. So wow. Just kudos to her. And I always appreciate her in all the shows because I think it's incredible what she's doing.
Thank you, Mariam.
Just for context. So the next question I have is, would you rather have the power to instantly learn a skill or have unlimited wealth? I'm going to start with you, Arfah.
Sorry, unlimited?
Wealth.
Oh, probably unlimited wealth because you could then pay someone to teach you to learn skills. It might take longer, but you could still get to the same goal. And then with wealth, you can do good with it.
That's really interesting. What about yourself, Fareen?
I agree with Arfah, because why would you want to learn a skill fast when you can get money? You get unlimited wealth and you can learn a skill. It takes time to learn a skill anyways, so it's not going to be anything different. But unlimited wealth, that's something I can't pass on.
That's really interesting because I have the complete different perspective of this. I feel like I would want to have the ability to learn a skill instantly, because if I learn how to make money instantly, sure, it might take a little bit more time, but then I'll be able to diversify that money and I'll be able to compound that money. But also I'll get to learn other skills that might be more interesting to me in terms of learning languages, and that will actually increase my capital. So I have a very different perspective, but it's really interesting how you both view it. In terms of the next question, would you rather have the ability to experience the emotion of others or have others experience your emotions without control? And I want you guys to think about this quite carefully because it's quite a loaded question.
So if we want to feel other people's emotions, or we want other people to feel our emotions?
So I'll repeat the question. Would you rather have the ability to experience the emotions of others or have the others experience your emotions without control? So you're constantly feeling other people's emotions, or people are able to experience your emotions, but you won't have any sense of control of that.
I think I'll take option B. I don't want to feel other people's emotions. I get so overwhelmed. You have so many emotions of like yourself. When you're angry, you're sad, you're this. You don't want to be extra angry or extra sad. So yeah, definitely I'll let people feel my emotions.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
I think so as well. I think we all can concede to that fact. Okay, the next question is a bit more light-hearted. I've been making you guys think a lot. Would you rather spend a week exploring outer space or a week exploring the deep ocean, and give a reason why you would choose your choice?
I mean, after the recent travesty of the Titanic submarines, I think ocean is probably out of the question for a while. So I'd go for space.
What do you do in space? What do you think? What would you do?
I would jump around in Mars or something.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, right? Because I feel like there's so much, like, the sea is more vast and mysterious than space. Mm-hmm. So actually there is more to experience in the sea. But I think there's also, it just feels more scary. I mean, both are scary, right? But I don't know. I mean, as a kid, I always wanted to be like an astronaut. So I think for me, like, space has more of that appeal.
Yeah, I think it's not, for me, it's not the space itself, it's the whole journey of it, sitting in the plane, and you know, the gravity thing that they show you in the movies. That's what's interesting to me. And in the sea, I think it's because it's so accessible. You can just go anywhere to the sea and just sit there. So I think I'll choose outer space as well. And I really like seeing like movies about like planets and all of that stuff, sci-fi stuff. So definitely outer space.
I agree with you both. I think the deep ocean is quite scary actually. But outer space doesn't seem as scary, which is strange, but it's a strange phenomenon. I think I would want to know what happens in a black hole. It defies all laws of physics, so that's why it's just very interesting to me what actually would happen in a black hole. So that's my answer.
I think you might get bored though. Like I feel like you won't get bored because there's lots to see, depending on where you go, I guess. But with space, once you've explored all the planets, there's no one else to like. Yeah, unless you meet an alien or something, then
hopefully not.
But do you think it's because human intelligence is so limited and we don't know what's out in space, and that's why we're framing it in a sense that from our limited knowledge, there might be so much things out there, but we just don't know.
That is true as well. I think there is a lot to see. But yeah, no, I think I still lean towards space.
Same. I think we're all going to do space travel.
Yeah.
Okay, so... Okay, so the next question is, would you rather be able to understand every language spoken by humans or be able to communicate with animals? Arfah?
The first one.
Every language, and why?
I just think, language is such a powerful skill. And I think if you could, especially these days when people are traveling more, etc., I think the ability to kind of connect with other humans in their language is just really powerful. I mean, with animals, they don't talk to us right now, and it makes no difference to my life. So, whereas I feel like being able to communicate with humans in whatever language possible, it would make a massive impact.
I think so as well. What's your thoughts,
Yeah,
Irene?
I completely agree with you both. I think, like Arfah said, it doesn't make any difference now. We don't talk to animals now. It doesn't matter if we do it in the future. I mean, it would be interesting to know what they're, I don't know, saying or feeling, whatever animals do. But I think languages, it is, I agree with Arfah, it's such an important skill. And imagine going to any language, you don't have to like translate. You can just be like a local and talk with anyone. So yeah, definitely languages.
So what would you do? So for instance, you have that ability to speak any language. What's the first thing you would do? And I'm going to ask Arfah.
What's the first thing I would do? I mean, I'm always quite curious about people, so I would just start talking to people like while on holiday, or if I was just traveling and just trying to learn more about them and their life, and can I connect with them on a deeper level.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think traveling really does open your mind, especially when you're exposed to people's cultures and different way of thinking. And I think people define things very differently as well across different cultures, and I find that very intriguing. What about yourself, Irene?
I think, you know what languages, the place that I always enjoy the most, and you can see so many cultures, is those markets that they have in those little villages and those little towns. So I think you would go to, I don't know, Turkey or something, and you know those little markets, that's where I would use, I don't know, my Turkish skills and talking with the people from the village. I think when you go to a city, when you travel to a city, it's not that there's not that homely feeling, but I really like when there's like small villages and you can talk with all the people that are there in the towns and how they live. So I would definitely would be my first place, I think, would be Turkey.
Turkey. Can you just tell us about your experience in Spain and how that panned out? Because obviously you can speak Spanish fluently since you grew up there. Did you feel like the way you immersed in culture over there was very different to the UK when you came here?
I think so. I think Spanish culture is so, how do you say, like, it's so heavy. Like, it's everywhere. So I was managing, my Indian culture, my Indian ethnicity with the Spanish culture, and there was two sides of me. There was two different personalities, but I think my parents, they wanted me to balance that and kind of, so I'm Spanish, I'm Indian, I'm this, I'm that, but I think it was really easy, to be honest, because I was going through it with my siblings. So it was like a group experience of getting Spanish culture and the Indian culture ingrained in me.
Did you think there's a difference between Spanish kind of identity and British identity in terms of the way they conduct themselves?
Yeah, but I think Spanish people, because I've grew up there, then it's so much more homely to me. So I think I will always gel more with Spanish people. But yeah, I think British people, yeah, no, I don't know. It's kind of the same. It's kind of the same.
Do you think it's the same? I feel like Spanish people are very warm-hearted. Not to say that British people aren't, but when you go to Spain, I feel like I felt people are very hospitable. People are very warm and kind and very open. I don't know, Arfah, have you ever been to Spain?
Yeah, where did I go? I think I went to Madrid and Alicante, which is like a beach coastal town. Yeah, I think there is definitely a level of hospitality that is there for sure.
Yeah, that's why I always love going there, but it's always a different experience. It's so different from when you start wearing hijab and when you don't. So when I wasn't wearing it, I just felt like a Spanish local. Then when I came back, so when I came for the holidays, I just felt like from like outside. I feel like an outsider because I was wearing my scarf and people weren't being as warm sometimes. But
people were sorry, can you repeat that?
They weren't being as warm as they were when I wasn't wearing it. That's maybe what I felt like because I just went there, but yeah.
I'm really sorry to hear that, that you saw there's a difference between the both. I've been wearing hijab since I was very young, so for me, I feel like I've kind of grew up with the way people have viewed me and perceived me. Well, that's a whole different discussion for another day.
Definitely.
I think the last question, the last final 2 minutes that we have on the show until we go for the break is, would you rather live in a world where it's always summer or a world where it's always winter?
Summer.
Summer?
I hate winter.
Okay, give us reasons. What do you do in summers?
I don't do anything, but I have 3 reasons. Look, in winter you have to layer so much, so you have to think your outfits through. In summer you can just wear one. I can just literally just wearing a dress today, and that's it. You don't have to worry about what jacket you're gonna match, or your gloves, or this and that. First, then the weather is really nice, so you can do anything. You can go to the sea. You can do outside activities. Third, it just looks so much better. Like you don't want to look out your window and see I don't know, like clouds and grey stuff.
Okay, and Arfah?
I think today's a prime example. I mean, where I am right today, the sun has come out. Yesterday, it was very gloomy, miserable, rainy. I just feel like the sun just puts everyone in a better mood. And I just feel like you're just able to do so many things. Like, yeah, all the outdoor activities. Like, it's been really annoying actually over this last nearly 6 weeks, I would say, of really bad, unpredictable weather, where I just feel like the summer's gone and all these plans and activities we had, days out, cycling trips, this, that, etc., none of that happened. So I would just love the ability to have summer all through the year, because then it's not limited where, I don't know, cycling, for example, you only tend to do that in the summer months if you're a bit of a hobbyist like me. So if I had summer throughout the year, it would be something I would be doing throughout the year, right? So I think it's just one of those things.
Absolutely, and I think that it's a really nice way to kind of round up the first half of the show. And for me personally, I definitely think summer. I just love the sun. I tend to even go to sleep with the windows open because I really enjoy it. So that is the first half of the show. In the next half, we'll be talking about Muslamic Makers. So see you in the next half. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Atif Nawaz. Listen to Inspire FM shows in your time by heading over to inspirefm.org or listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
يا هلا يا هلا يا هلا يا هلا.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome back to Sister Speak. You're here with me, Mariam, Fareen and Arfah from Muslamic Makers. On the first half of the show, we talked about our thoughts of the week and we played a game of Would You Rather. But in this half, we'll be talking about Muslamic Makers and how it was established. So for those who don't know, Muslamic Makers was established in 2016 and has had over 2,400 attendees, 45 events, and recently had its first Tech Fest in first Tech Fest in the Royal Institution. So it's an organisation that seeks to upskill, mentor and create networking opportunities for Muslims in the tech space. So I'm just going to delve right deep into it because I'm really excited to hear about Muslamic Makers and how it's established and the kind of influence it's creating to the Muslim community, which I'm really super passionate about. So the first question I have, Arfah, is what led to the creation of Muslamic Makers and what is its main goals and initiatives?
Yeah, sure. So it started back in 2016, and this was when I was very early in my tech career. And I basically found that when I was going to these tech meetups, I didn't see people like myself on the stages. The events had, beer and pizza. There wasn't really like a prayer space. And another friend of mine, who actually I connected over Twitter, and now known as X, also experienced this, and he just approached me and he's like, hey, I've got this idea. I want to set up like a meetup for Muslims working in tech. And I was like, oh, that's really funny. I've had a similar idea that I've been sitting on like for the last 2 years, but I thought, only 5 people in the coffee shop will turn up because there's not that many of us. However, we did our first event and like 50 people turned up, some already in tech, some, interested in breaking into tech. And then we realized, okay, there's a bit of a demand for this, there's an interest. And early on, I was talking about consistency, and consistency was the forefront, because in our first very early years, year 1, year 2, etc., we used to do meetups nearly every month, at least every 2 months. And that really basically helped to establish us as this London meetup for Muslims interested in tech specifically, because there were already a lot of Muslim professional networks out there, but there was nothing focused around tech. And that's kind of where we, in a sense, came in. A lot of the other Muslim professional networks, they supported us, they advertised for us as well and stuff. So, everyone was very supportive earlier on. And then on top of that, So yeah, that happened, and it really kind of just started off with the piece of just around inspiring, because you have to see it to believe it. So if you saw people like yourselves on the stages, you would, as an entrepreneur doing a certain tech career, you would start to think, oh, it's possible for me to do that. So it really kind of started off very specifically, kind of just focused on that, around the inspire piece, and then around time. And then around lockdown, what ended up happening was, if everything we was doing was in person, it was like, oh, now what, right? We already had like a Slack community where people could interact with each other. So we started to double down a bit more on our online community. We created like a Kickstarter careers program. We started to do a few courses around product management, data science, etc., and really kind of focusing on upskilling. And then when kind of lockdown and stuff was over, we decided that actually what we love doing and what people enjoy the most and what we're known for are our events. And we started to go back into like the event space and doubling down on the event. So it's like upskilling, knowledge sharing, and kind of like connecting people.
Incredible. And just on the basis of those on that answer, could you just tell us about the Kickstart program and how that was kind of panned out, and what kind of feedback did you get from your beneficiaries?
Yeah, so the Kickstarter program. So the funny thing about the Kickstarter program was we named it before the government had their own Kickstarter program. So it was really funny because it happened at the same time. So for context, the government launched a Kickstarter program to get, I think, like people get smaller companies to hire like 16, 17-year-olds, etc. And they would like pay for like the income tax or something like that. Anyways, ours was not related to that, but the reason why we called it Kickstarter, because I recognized that over the X amount of years of doing Muslamic Makers, people just didn't know where to start when it came to tech careers. They wanted to really understand everything that was going on. So we designed this program. I think it was over like 4 months or something like that. And every 2 weeks we explored a different subject. So it's like, 1 week would be like product management, and then they would have an activity to go away to kind of practice some product management skills, or 1 week would be marketing. And then so it was like giving them like a small little taste in terms of like the different like avenues they could go down. And my favorite is we had like data science, machine learning, kind of AI these days, as it's now kind of like really kind of talked about. So the machine learning actually was probably the biggest success, actually, because there were a couple of people that were really interested in going into data analytical careers and then went on to like secure graduate schemes, or went on to actually further their learnings. Because it's not easy, right? It's not as simple as, you're going to do our course, because our course isn't a technical course. It's just about inspiring people and giving them a taste so that they have direction. And they also had like a mentor who can kind of help and support them. So there was kind of all of that going on. And then off the back of that, then there were basically a new community had formed within Muslamic Makers called the Machine Learning. So the machine learning channel is our most popular channel on Muslamic Makers, because that community kind of just came from the Kickstarter program. And off the back of that, they started to do kind of Sunday reading, and the people between themselves would start to self-organize. So actually a lot of their learnings kind of went on. And then there were a few people that kind of changed careers or got jobs that they never thought that they would get. And I think a lot of them credit the fact that they were able to do the Kickstarter program. It gave them the knowledge and insight and the tools they needed to know what they needed to learn next.
I think that's incredible, and I think that is really useful and valuable for people who come from underrepresented backgrounds. A lot of it sounds like so much social mobility work, which is something that I'm really passionate about. And I think it's right what you're saying in terms of giving people the ability to have access or taste of what tech looks like, and give them that direction or that support for them to be able to kind of navigate a space that they might not have originally planned to go to, or something that they probably think they won't be able to. So thank you for sharing that. And I think if anyone is interested, they can access Muslamic Makers on all their social media platforms. They have a Twitter, they have X, and they have Instagram, and they have a website as well to gain some, if you want to gain some more knowledge on that. I just want to ask you a question in terms of your chapters, because I know there's 4 chapters of Muslamic Makers, and I just want to know more, how did that kind of pan out? I think it's an incredible achievement, so I really would like you to delve deeper into it, and also explain what chapters is to our audience.
So chapters is really special for me, actually. So chapters ultimately are local community members running with Muslamic Makers wherever they are in the world, basically. So they start to put meetups, and the story behind that is being London-based, or I was, I still am, I guess, London-based, and our team was London-based. We were very London-heavy and London-centric, and naturally during lockdown, our community grew more. I mean, we still had people like in the UK and stuff, but during lockdown it definitely grew more internationally. And I always had this vision that I wanted to empower the community to basically use our resources and be able to actually do good in their local area. So off the back of that, the first chapter, so Manchester is a really interesting one. So Manchester, before lockdown, we tried to set up the Manchester chapter way before lockdown, and then I remember we had a meeting, our first meetup scheduled for Manchester, and then lockdown happened. So then that basically pushed us back for 2 years. So then once lockdown was done, and then the Manchester chapter, definitely I would say is one of the that are definitely like on par with London now, I would say, in terms of the amount of events that they do. That team is like so great, and they just do some really amazing work. And, you know, so now it's really nice because actually there is obviously a massive Muslim community in Manchester, but also Manchester is a decent tech scene as well. So it kind of aligns really well. And ultimately then, you know, we had some brothers in Boston, America, who were really keen on doing something there. And then a sister that actually used to be part of the Muslamic Makers community in London moved back to Toronto, Canada. And she was like, there's nothing like this hair. I want to do Muslamic Makers hair. I've seen you're starting to do these chapters. How can you help me do that? And ultimately, we've created a structure where, so we have like a central team, as I call it, and the central team kind of does all the boring things, the Eventbrite, the social media, you know, those things that actually like just are admin-y. And then we empower the volunteers to basically be like, okay, you know your local area, you go find a venue space, you go find, you know, some speakers that are passionate, and then let's get an event in the diary, and let's start to, you know, get that local community formed. And yeah, we've got a few others in the pipeline. Luton might be in the works too, just letting you know.
We're all interested in Luton, don't worry.
So
I think we found a volunteer. You recruited a volunteer now.
Yeah, there are a few members actually based in Luton, so they're you know, and often actually what I do is like, my role is to facilitate. So ultimately all I'm doing is connecting people, and then I'm saying, right, you're passionate about this, you go away, you have a thing, you let me know what you need. And then ultimately, because they come with the power of the Muslamic Makers brand, it's much more easier for them to then convince a tech company to give them free venue space, because they're like, look, we're actually part of Muslamic Makers, and they've been doing this thing for 8 years, and they've partnered with all these tech companies. So all of a sudden, people actually pay more attention. I think so.
Yeah, I think the power of brand is very, very... Sorry to interrupt. It's really, really powerful. And I think one of the things that I think is so incredible about Muslamic Makers is that it's homegrown talent. It's grassroots, but it's also very expansive in a sense where everyone is interconnected and everyone is ready to be able to facilitate that change or to influence change. So I think that's really incredible, and I think that's a really good segue for my next question is, how do you envision the role of Muslims in the tech industry, which is evolving in the next couple of years, or even the next decade?
Yeah, I think we're just getting started, I think, is the first thing, right? So Muslamic Makers started back in 2016. That was very early, right? Nobody was paying much attention then. And I've seen firsthand over the last couple of years, people get really excited about getting into tech, this, that, etc. And, you know, like tech TikTok and this, that. It's like really interesting to watch, because as somebody who was like right there at the start, and then to see the emergence of it and more people, you know, hype it up too, I would say, you know, sometimes there's a bit of an overhype as well, and I think it's important to recognize that. There's a lot of hype around it now. In terms of, I guess, the roles of Muslims within kind of the tech space, there's like 2 or 3 angles you can look at it. One is in terms of like mainstream tech, and actually the importance of our people being the people behind building these AI tools, because AI isn't biased, humans are. So actually, if our people are the ones building the algorithms, etc., there's a lot of considerations that can be taken. I mean, even ChatGPT, right? We all love ChatGPT. I use it as part of my workflow now. It's like, you know, I use it every day. It's just normal for me now. But ChatGPT, historically, when ChatGPT was actually a closed infrastructure and only some researchers, etc., had access to it, ChatGPT was Islamophobic. You know, you would put certain commands into ChatGPT, and it would, and that wasn't ChatGPT's fault. that was probably the human's fault, but actually Google's fault as well, because actually there were so many Islamophobia articles that were ultimately it's analyzing off the back of that, right? But the human behind building the algorithm hasn't put the certain benchmark. Now, if you say to ChatGPT, what do you think of Muslims? It gives you a very apolite answer that can't be skewed in any way. So they've learned, right? People have learned to actually, we've got to be really careful about how we do this, etc., etc. So I think the role of Muslims, people of color, minorities, women within tech infrastructure is really important from like a societal point of view, especially as AI is becoming like second nature in terms of everything we do. Then the other angle is from an Islamic point of view, right? And in terms of how tech can actually enable our deen, and how actually we can do further with that. A good example of that is, there's this app called Guider, and then basically what they've basically done is took, if you've ever used like Duolingo, the language app, micro-learning, the habits of breaking micro, they basically just built an app to be like, okay, so if your goal is, I want to be a bit more conscious in Salah, for example, they've like broke it all down so that every day you just do 3 minutes, right? And I mean, there's that hadith about kind of consistent small habits, right? And ultimately that's what it is. And they've kind of took that, used tech principles, used good examples of tech products that weren't in the Muslim market, and then applied it for an audience like us now that are super tech savvy, that want pretty products, that want good user experience, etc. And they're just like one of many that are starting to like appear. So I think that's really exciting as well, in terms of like what we can do to help each other as Muslims. I mean, you know, Launch Good is another one. Just the fact that they have automation stuff on a Jummah, on a Friday, or during Ramadan. My 10 Nights is another example. Again, I know there's a bit of controversy around kind of, oh, is it taking away the consciousness and stuff? You know, there's obviously, you know, pros and cons of things and stuff, but ultimately all of these tech tools have done is they're enabling people to be better Muslims, they're enabling people to give charity. So actually, if you look on the principle of things, there's just so much more goodness that can be done through tech on a bigger scale.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that, just to round it off, is that having this increased representation of Muslims in the tech space really is shaping the digital landscape. And like you mentioned, it is enabling us to be able to utilize these tools effectively to help us become better Muslims, but also to be able to allow us to infiltrate sectors that we were not had access to. So I think even historically, if you look at Islamic history, we were pioneers, and I think that's something we should go back to as well. We were the ones that were discovering multiple things in terms of humanities, philosophy, even in terms of physics. All of these algorithms actually comes from Muslims. We're the ones that pioneered that. So I think it's really important to kind of think about how we are, as Muslims, are always striving for ihsan and excellence, and we should be able to infiltrate every sector and to be able to make the best out of it, and always have that optimistic principle that we're able to use this for our advantage. So thank you for sharing that. I think my kind of next question is how can initiatives like Muslamic Makers continue to drive positive change and empowerment?
So the continue part is really interesting. I think it's about building the right infrastructure. So like with Muslamic Makers, right, I've always been very conscious that when I started Muslamic Makers, I was single, I didn't have a baby, I wasn't married, like all those things, right? So the amount of time and love and effort I could give it is very different to what I can give it today. And so it's been very important for me to try and put some kind of infrastructure in place so that actually the effort continues. And that's why it's been really important for me to empower other community members to run with it, and almost I become just an advisor for them, or I don't get involved in, you know, a good example is yesterday we went to go see a venue to do a partnership for kind of our London meetups, and then I had the London team, kind of London volunteers, kind of come along with me, and then the moment they started talking about planning it, I was like, cool, you guys do that, I'm out. Like, I'm not gonna, you know, or simply like, they're like, oh yeah, we'll schedule it for next week. I'm like, yeah, don't invite me to that meeting, because I'm purposely not trying not to be like the blocker anymore. And I think infrastructure often is not thought about. And unfortunately, in our Muslim organizations, mine included even, because it took me a very long time to land on an infrastructure that I feel is working now. is that all these great projects start, they go on for a few years, and then boom, they disappear because we don't have the funding, or unfortunately as Muslims we don't fund it ourselves. All these things happen all the time with Muslim organizations. And that's why I think, you know, if I was to build now compared to like what I built 8 years ago, I would have built it very differently. I would have built it very in a sustainable mindset. To this day, like I still, right now I think I'm, you know, is okay for like the next year or two, because I can, you know, I have a paid staff member that I can kind of pay to kind of help keep things ticking over, etc. But the moment I don't have that money, or that money runs out, because we don't really have, you know, most of our money comes potentially either from sponsorships, doesn't really come from the community because all our events are for free. When we've tried to get money from the community, people get so comfortable with the fact that we've given things for free that people aren't willing to pay, you know. And so that in itself, so I would just build everything so differently. I would build sustainability right from the start and being more commercial, because I feel like being more commercial allows things to live on. Whereas unfortunately, because sometimes we come from a charity mindset or doing good mindset, which I think is a general not a problem, it's, you know, it's a good thing that we have that. Unfortunately, in the long run, it just doesn't work.
I think that's absolutely right in terms of having balance, in terms of having the sustainable mindset, but also understanding the longevity of your organization. And I think you're downplaying what you've achieved, Arfah. I feel like you have achieved so much impact that it's not even tangible, or it can't even be measured. And I think that's what hindsight is about. It's about going through.
That's it hard though, not being able to measure it, because when you do something that's in events, community connections, it's very hard to be like, somebody came to our event, they got inspired, they built a business, because half the time those stories don't come back to me. Or and when people do share, like I remember there was a story from one of our Manchester events. A sister went to the event, she got really inspired to get into UX design, she joined our Slack, she like dropped a message in the Slack, some other sister connected her to some other opportunity, and then she actually started her career as you. And then it was really nice when she shared that with us. Often we don't get to hear those stories because, you know, it's not as tangible in terms of like a product, or hey, we raised money, or we did this, right? Like, it's so hard to measure human kindness in a way.
I think so as well. Even in the Tech Fest, I remember you emphasized so much to make sure that we do evaluation forms. I think that's something that we need to get accustomed to, because in order for organizations to be sustainable, you need to have that data. It needs to be data informed, and whether that's quantitative or qualitative, that data will inform how the vision of the organization will survive in the next couple of years. And I think a good example of data is Muslim Census and how they sustain themselves. And even then, they a company, they commercialize from the very beginning, and they're still able to influence change. So having that mindset is very important from the beginning. And I think as Muslims, I think we do have that charitable mindset, and I think that's conducive to change, but it has to be in balance in terms of how we think about how we're going to sustain this for the long term. And I think it's multiple factors that can be influenced by this, because of course, you know, we kind of have this mindset that we need to, from our parents who have come here to survive, it's very easy for us to just want to give back, but without understanding that it could be implicated with the fact that it might not be of a long term. So I think it's really important that we kind of have these discussions, and to be able to think about how do we leave a legacy that's going to be surpassing us. Thank you, Arfah, for kind of sharing that. I think the next thing I kind of want to talk about, which we only have a couple of minutes, I don't know where the show has flown by, is about the challenges that you perhaps face, or challenges in the tech industry for Muslims to know about. So I think the first question is what challenges or barriers do Muslims still encounter in the tech industry today, and how can they be addressed?
So I think one thing to acknowledge is it's way better now than it was when I first started. I shared a story on TikTok the other day actually about how a couple of years ago I went to this kind of digital tech festival. By festival, it was like a small meetup as part of this festival. And then I was given like a drinks token, and when I queued up to get my drink, they told me I could only use an alcoholic drink. And I was like mind blown, right? Because my soft drink, my Coke, is cheaper than your beer. And just these little oversights often happen. And to this day, you know, I might find myself in certain events in certain places where there might be fancy canapes, but they're not labeled properly, so then you don't know what you can eat. And, you know, these kind of environments, you might just kind of find yourself in, or a client, again, I remember, again, from my early days, when I was doing a marketing role, we were working with this other agency, and for Christmas, as people do, they send you presents and stuff, which is fine. But the present that I got was a bottle of champagne, and it was just a bit like, oh, well, this isn't useful for me, so I might as well give this to the team. And it's, it's not my hard work being acknowledged. There's nothing I can do with that. And again, like, it was like, okay, so I actually remember writing that email back to that thing and being like, well, thanks for the thing, but FYI, I'm Muslim and I don't drink, just for future considerations. And I think I've always been quite brave like that, to kind of call it out. But I think if you're very early on in your career, often people are quite shy about it. And rightfully so, because you don't want to be penalized. And I think it's just kind of one of those things. I always say, again, in one of my earlier jobs, there was no prayer space. I used to bust out my prayer mat, but there used to be students. It was a coding boot camp that I used to work at. And
we do have I'm so sorry, Arfah, we only have 2 minutes left, but so if you could round up this answer, because there's one more pressing question I really want to ask.
Yeah, sure. So just to conclude that one, basically, when the other Muslim students used to come, because I was the only other Muslim employee, they would come to me and be like, hey, where can I pray? And I'd be like, here you go. The employers, they actually acknowledged that, so that when they actually acquired another floor, they made sure they created like a well-being corner, prayer corner, etc., so that everybody could benefit. And I think ultimately it's just about, like, you've just got to be brave.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that can be applied to every kind of sector, to be able to be unapologetic about your faith, and that will be a good setting stone for other people who may come after you to be able to navigate that space. I think the final question I want to ask you, since you have a bank of experience, is what advice would you give to young Muslims aspiring to pursue careers in the tech field, considering the potential challenges? And you'll have to answer this very quickly, maybe in like 30 seconds, but I think it's a very important question.
YouTube, TikTok, Udemy, all these, everything, the answer is online, right? You can learn everything online, so just get the experience and just start building, I would say, and just start looking online, because I think you have it so much more easier than people like did 10 years ago. So I think just start.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good advice. I think utilising the tools that you already have in terms of resources, and in fact, looking at Muslamic Makers, join their Slack team, join their Instagram pages. They also have a picnic this week in Regent's Park, I think, and on Saturday, which I'll be going to as well, hopefully. So just try to meet new people. I think that's one of the fundamental ways to access a new space. Thank you, Arfah, for having us, for being on our show, and we look forward to having you in future instances. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Why not tune in to our live stream at inspirefm.org and follow and subscribe to our social media platforms at InspireFM Luton.